having a pretty hair is all that matters.
Who cares about Terry?
Oh, please. That's for losers.
Yeah.
Test, test. Okay. How do I sound now? You hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And Luke.
Is this thing on?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, y'all. Is it me or you? Okay, let's see what happens when I sit down. Okay.
All right, I think we're good.
All right. All right.
A little bit.
I feel like it's me.
Yeah, I think it's you.
It is you.
It's me. Okay. Yeah, we are still getting a little bit of it, but I want to make sure that y'all can hear me. Susan, can y'all hear me right in the back?
I hear you. Maybe sitting underneath the speaker.
Am I sitting underneath the speaker? Do I need to?
You're good.
Okay, am I? Oh, okay, this gets better. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, it does.
Does? Okay, sounds good. All right, y'all. Thank you for being here. We're about to start our second session of Sunday School Faith, Science, and Technology. How does our faith intersect with the latest developments in science? And if you weren't here last week, we talked about, are we recording, by the way? Thank you. If you were here last week, we talked about what is technology and why it matters that we discern about technology. And I know that a lot of you, most of the questions that we got, several of the questions that we got is looking forward, right? Like talking about AI and talking about the future and all the things that we see coming up. But in order to talk about what's coming up, we need to talk about where we are. So today, our topic is called Living the Digital Life. And what we're going to do here is talk a little bit about history of how we got here in the digital life, the sentiment behind the digital life back then and today, and how it intersects with how we practice our faith today, how we are Christians in this world, in the digital life. So I'm going to pray and start with a question for Luke Birdie. Lord Jesus, thank you so much for this morning. Thank you for these folks here. Thank you for the conversations that we get to have. May you be at the helm of everything that we do. May you be glorified. In your name we pray. Amen. So, Luke, as we talk about the history of digital life, history of the internet, you were there at the beginning. Ish,
yeah.
If y'all, for those of you who need a little bit of history on the internet, starts with a military project in the 70s, 80s.
Probably the 80s, yeah.
ARPANET and all that kind of stuff. And in the 90s, or late 80s, early 90s, it becomes a civilian project, and we have the internet exploding and starting everywhere, and that's right about when Luke leaves the Air Force,
I left in 1990, yes.
1990, and starts working for private companies and right there with the internet. Can you tell me a little bit about that point in your career, what you started doing?
Sure. So while I was at Louisiana College, Dr. Roseanne Osborne, who many of you know, she was right at the forefront. She and Dennis Watson were pushing the boundaries of technology. And she knew that I had just gotten out of the Air Force and that I'd worked on electronics in the Air Force. So she had these computers that had little network connectors at the back of them. And she looked me up and said, hey, would you be interested in trying to help me connect these all together? And it didn't look too intimidating, so I went ahead and said sure, and we played around, and it looked like a phone plug to me, so I just wired it up, and there was no document to look at. And we plugged it together, and it worked. And then later on, we started learning the way we should have done it, and so we went back and fixed it. But it worked, and then that was probably 92, 93 time frame, and then Roseanne got a grant to install an internet connection at Louisiana College, and as far as I know, that was the first internet presence in Rapides Parish.
Wow.
And so we got connected to the internet, and there was a couple of computer labs that I had wired up, and we connected those labs together and connected those to the internet. And this is before we had the World Wide Web. It was before there were web browsers. We had things like Archie servers, and we used FTP and Telnet and all these old things. But it was a very optimistic, it was very progressive in that it was all positive stuff. People weren't too worried about security. You could go and connect to different things, and every day was mind-blowing. I'll never forget one time I was searching around and I came across something that said UT, and I thought, oh, University of Texas, or University of Tennessee maybe. No, it was University of Tasmania. And I remember just being absolutely dumbfounded that location was no longer a factor. And then when the internet, what we call the internet today, but the World Wide Web came along probably in the 94, 95 time frame, and a guy at the University of Illinois named Mark Andreessen created this thing called a web browser, and the first one was called Mosaic. And we tried Mosaic, and that just blew our minds. And I remember sitting in a room and looking over at Dr. Osborne and saying, this gives everybody the same voice. So it's no longer a matter of the big corporation speaks louder than the individual. Now the individual can speak with the same voice as anybody else. And we were just absolutely blown away by that concept.
So before you keep going Luke, how many of you understand what Luke means when he says the World Wide Web didn't exist? Like, do I get nods? Do you understand? Do you not? Okay, so we do understand what that means. So that's a big deal, and we're going to talk about those movements in in technology. The World Wide Web existing gets the internet from the realm of labs, and you have to know what you're doing. Like, you have to know what you want to do, to the realm of browsing. And it's a place where you can just go, and then, later on we get verbs like surf the web and stuff like that. So it's from, oh, I know that I want to connect to University of Tasmania, to let's just see what's going on. And when we look back, that's kind of one of the main hinge points of the internet in our lives, is the World Wide Web existing. And that's when, kind of like a little after that, you leave LC and you start working for other places here, right?
Yeah, so I graduated in '95 and I had been accepted into a grad school in molecular biology. I was going to go become a molecular biologist. But Clico had heard that I knew how to put computers on the internet, and they came to me and said, "Would you like a summer job?" I said, "Sure." And so my first day at Clico was the day they turned off the mainframe computer. Mainframes have been a part of my life. My mom worked on mainframes, back into the '60s. She worked in what back then was called data processing. But that's not the term that's used anymore. But I put Clico on the internet. I had the first Clico email address. I built the first Clico web server. But then, of course, they waved some money in front of my face, and that was a lot more than they were paying grad students at the medical school where I was going to go study. So I went for the money and started a career in the IT business, and then I worked for Clico for the next 4 years and put Clico on the web.
Okay, so you are at the forefront of the internet in this area, at the very least. The sentiment is very optimistic.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone has a computer yet at the time, so you leave Clico around 98, 99?
I left in '99. The Y2K boom was hitting, and that was the first sort of sense that there's some bad things happening.
Okay, let's stop there. Let's stop there because we go from a very positive sentiment. And notice, y'all, that I'm talking about sentiment a lot because our goal here is not necessarily to understand the history of the internet. That's fun, I like it. But I want us to see these movements that are happening. So one of the movements that I want us to see is this movement from relentless or undoubted optimism to where we are today. So Y2K, what is the feeling there? What's the sentiment?
Well, many of you remember.
I don't, sorry.
Okay. So the issue with Y2K was that computers that had been built in the 60s, 70s, and 80s often used just two numbers to specify the year. And so when we went from 1999 to 2000, there was this idea that it was going to crash all the computers, and people were talking Armageddon. And I was in the computer industry at that point, and we were working overtime to make sure that didn't happen. And in fact, when we switched over, I was sitting in the data center, the Texas Instruments data center in Dallas, Texas, and it was a very boring night. Nobody scheduled any routine maintenance. It was like, let's just make sure that we're all still alive in the morning, And it was boring, and we watched TV and fireworks. So it turned out to be a big nothing, but it's because there had been a lot of work ahead of time. But
it's the first time that as a society, we start to think, hey, a lot of our lives are in these computers, and this is 1999, and we think that, think about, this is 25 years ago, and we're thinking that. A lot of our lives are in computers. If are on computers, in computers, I don't know what preposition you want to use because this is not a grammar matter, this is a philosophical matter at this point. And if this gets messed up, what's going to happen to us? Yeah. Even though it turned out to be a big nothing, I think that the sentiment is very important there because that's a sentiment that we have today. There's a sentiment that you have even in cultural productions. That's the first Terminator movies, 2003 or 90 something. Does anyone remember first Terminator movie?
Somebody Google it.
Yeah, someone. Yes, Connie, what is it? Oh, I thought you had an answer to us.
No, I watched it.
But funny that both Connies are in this direction in my eyes. So, anyways, so first Terminator movie is right there, turn of the millennia.
Blade Runner came before all that.
1984.
What?
First Terminator is 1984.
The Terminator. 1984.
Wow.
Wow.
So I was wrong there. Well, okay, forget that. But we have that societal sentiment that
Yeah.
something could go wrong.
Yeah.
But nothing happens. Early 2000s, internet is booming, and now everyone has internet, right? Like
Right.
it's getting to that point, and that's when you're on Sun Microsystems.
Yeah, so in '99, Sun Microsystems, which was a big computer corporation, came and, well, I started working for them. And I spent 10 years with them, and so I was there for a lot of the commercialization of the internet, and went to a lot of really big corporations, and I saw how much money was going into this. And I guess that's where I really, what started happening was this desire to grab your attention. And so what we see in the internet today started back 25, 30 years ago. It was this desire to grab your attention. And the web servers were, you always had to keep them online. The uptime requirements were incredible, and it was all about grabbing people's attention.
Okay, it's all about grabbing people's attention. And if I'm not mistaken, this is around the time, that social media starts to come about. MySpace,
Yeah.
early 2000s, Facebook, a few years after that. And when we talk about social media, what we all know, Facebook, Instagram today, MySpace back then, it starts what we call the Web 2.0. Because the beginning of the web, you had to have a guy like Luke putting Clickle on the internet, putting LC on the internet. Nowadays, you might need your grandchild to put you on the internet, but anyone can put themselves on the internet. That all started with the Web 2.0, when this social media spaces start happening. And we're gonna get to that just in just a second, but I want Luke to kind of recap the journey of the digital life.
Yeah.
Because you leave the industry in 2009. In 2007, we have a pretty big event that happens. We're going to talk about that in a second. But you talked about like how your mom started working with mainframes.
Yeah.
And where you were, and then where it was when it left. Like, can you talk about the journey of the computer?
Sure,
We talked about
sure.
that a little bit.
Yeah, so yesterday, or Friday,
Friday.
yeah, we were talking about this, and I said, well, the internet, or the computers started out in a lab somewhere. They were something that my mom went to work and worked on. And then they started entering the school, they started entering just regular offices, not the data processing center. And then they started moving into people's homes, but still the computer was something off in the other room, right? And now most of us, many of us have a laptop within range when we're watching TV, because, oh, what other movie have we seen that person in? Now we're carrying around a computer in our pocket, we're wearing it on our wrist, and you see how it's moving closer and closer to us. And then when you start thinking about other things like computer games and virtual realities, we're starting to enter into the computer's world. So it's sort of flipping inside out a little bit.
And so the way that you put it is, at one point, computers were brought into our spaces, and now we are being brought into the computer's space. The computer's space.
I was much more eloquent.
You were. This was a great morning, great coffee. Americano has great lunch on Fridays too. So anyways, I told Luke this summer when I was on vacation, I forgot to bring my sunglasses. So we spent like the first couple days everywhere we went trying to find sunglasses. And every glass store, optical store that we entered, the first thing on display was the Meta Ray-Ban glass partnership. That if you're not familiar with those have a camera in front of it, so they see everything you see. And I think some of them have screens that kind of like project something. I don't know.
I've not looked into
Yeah.
that very much,
I-
but yeah.
yeah.
So I could look at this and it would have Regina above your head. So it would recognize your face, and so it would help me remember people's names. As Ty will tell you that I sometimes mess up names.
But I think that the important thing, like there's just, if you've seen like all those movies that the person had a special goggles, and the goggles gave them information about what they were seeing and all that, that's where we are. But the interesting thing is that we are brought into the computer space.
Yeah.
The computer is dominating our vision. Apple is talking about spatial computing now. So that's you are in the computer space, and that's a big transition. That's a pretty big deal that we're talking about here. And I would say that a hinge point in that transition is the iPhone, 2007, because as long as you have to reach to a computer, as long as you have to get a laptop or something, it's still kind of bulky, still kind of like there, but when it's in your pocket, that transition kind of like can happen much faster. And a lot of studies point to the iPhone as the hinge moment in human development, and how kind of the way that we relate to the world changes for good and bad.
And I think also overseas it had an even bigger impact, because in America we had internet access was much more common than in other countries, and so people in other countries didn't have to wait for the internet to get to their home or their workplace. They could just get a cell phone and they were suddenly online.
Oh yeah, the digital revolution in some of the developing countries was way steeper than the US, because the US was at the forefront and all that. But I want to bring this back to one of the questions that we had and one of the theological points, because last week we talked about how we were created. Genesis 1, we were created to have dominion over creation. And when we say that we are being brought into the computer space, it's starting to sound like we are creating something that has dominion over us. In a way, it ends up dictating what we see and what we say. And I want to talk about that because it dictates what we see, not just if we have goggles in front of us, right? Because you think, oh, I'm not wearing those virtual reality things. I dictate what I see. But I want to talk to, I want you to explain, Luke, a little bit to us, what is an algorithm in just a second? Because one of our questions that we had was about the brokenness that we see online.
Mm-hmm.
How the church can be an avenue of hope in light of so much brokenness that we see online. But before we get there, I want to understand why we see so much brokenness online. Is it because the world is necessarily worse than it was 70 years ago? Or is it because of something else? And what is it that dictates what we see online? Can you tell us? Can you explain to us about that?
Sure. it goes back to attention, and I apologize. The attention thing really grabbed me yesterday after we had talked, so I kind of threw him a curveball with attention. But so let's set up a little bit of a dichotomy here. That as Adam and I were talking about a couple weeks ago, the world is actually, if you look at the data, the world is getting better at an amazing rate. If you look at the statistics of death rates of children and just some of those statistics that are measured, the world is getting better on just about any scale you want to look at. I have a book called The Rational Optimist that talks all about this, and I'd love to share it with you. But that's the reality. The data indicates that the world is actually getting a lot better. However, when things are better, you don't give it your attention. If something's working good, you kind of put it off to the side, right? And it comes back to attention. I have heard people talk about, we used to have this kind of economy or that kind of economy. Today we have an attention economy. There's this saying that I have known for years, if the product is free, you are the product.
Stop there.
Okay.
Stop there. That's true. What do you mean by if the product is free, you are the product? What are you talking about, Luke? Because you were suggesting that I'm for sale and I'm not for sale.
Your attention is for sale.
I never wanted to sell my attention.
But you do. We all do. And it's not a bad thing as long as you are aware of it. Don't be aware of this, I guess.
Okay, but you have to give me.
Let me give you an example. Okay,
yeah.
So
you know what? One way.
If you look on my phone, I've got a McDonald's app, I've got the Wendy's app, I've got just about any fast food place, I've got their app. Why? Because they give me free food. Why do they give me free food? Because they're tracking what I do on my phone, right? And this is not a new thing. If you ever used a Kroger card or these customer loyalty cards where you get a little bit of a discount on gas or something, why are they doing that? They're doing that because when you hand them your card, they swipe your card. The next thing you hand them is the credit card or a check, right? And so they're matching your name with what you purchased. Regina likes Kellogg's Corn Flakes and not the other. She doesn't like the Post Raisin brand. She wants Kellogg's. Okay, we're going to remember that, and then they're going to advertise to her in that way. I'm sorry, you're in my line of sight, so you're my victim today. This is going to be all cleared out next week. But it goes back to attention, okay? And they are mining your attention. This Adam could tell you about search engine optimization. It's all about. There is a very strong effort. The marketing world today is all about mining your attention. And all of this attention, all this data that they're gathering on you goes into an algorithm. And an algorithm is just an ordered step of operations, okay? It's a scary word, but it's not a scary concept. And so, you've all noticed how you do one search for shoes, and suddenly you're getting all this advertisement about shoes, right? Well, that's because the reason Google got to be one of the biggest corporations in the world is because they are selling your data to other companies, okay? So I would like, if I'm a shoe seller and I'm really trying to market to people between 30 and 60 male shoe shoppers, I could go to Google and they'll give me a list of all the people who have, who fit into that category. And they are harvesting all this data, okay? But Google's not the only one. The makers of Candy Crush are harvesting your data. McDonald's is harvesting my data. All of these companies are harvesting this data and they're selling the data And these algorithms are using that data to advertise to you.
Okay, so
And they're making a lot of money.
they're harvesting our data, they want our attention.
Mhm.
How does this relate to the fact that we see so much brokenness in the
Yeah.
world?
Okay, thank you for bringing us back to that. So where does the brokenness come from? Well, they can't harvest your data if you're out working in the garden, right? They want you online, and this is not something new to the computer. How do we keep you online? Well, we need to manufacture some conflict. You know, romance and conflict have sold since before Shakespeare, right? So these things are going to keep you online. They want to generate that cortisol in you, you know, that panic, that tension, right? Because that's going to keep you online. I mean, how many of you were checking the news yesterday more than normal? Because there was a lot of news yesterday, right? Well, the people that are making money off of your attention love that, okay? And if everything's good, if everybody's happy, then you're probably not going to be tuned in very much.
I've seen a lot of initiatives about, let's create a page that only posts good news. You probably have seen there's several of those.
Yeah.
But they never get as much traction as the pages that talk about bad news. Because it's a brain thing, right? If something bad is happening,
That's how we're wired.
you need to be aware of it. Because, imagine that you are a hunter-gatherer in the olden days, millions of years ago. If life is good, you can just relax, take a nap. But if there is a threat, an active threat, you need to know about the threat and run away.
Exactly.
And that's how our brains work to this day. I have an example about that. A few years ago, I have a friend, his name is Jack. Jack is a historian, he's doing his doctorate at Notre Dame. And we were in college together, and Jack and I were never best friends. We were those kind of friends that, you hang out every quarter. We were quarterly friends. And one day, Jack texts me right on the quarter and says, hey, you want to go for a walk tomorrow? We need to catch up. And I was like, absolutely, let's go for a walk tomorrow. And then the day comes, and I text him, and I was like, hey, are you ready to go? And he says, no, I need to watch the news. History is happening right now. Something unprecedented was happening, and we both turned on the biggest news channels, and instead of going for a leisurely walk by the Brazos River to talk about our lives, to talk about how God was working in our lives, to talk about so many good things that we had to talk about, we spent the next 3 hours sitting on the couch with a TV and a computer trying to research all of the bad things that was happening on that day.
Yeah. And that is a common thing. And I don't want to say that it's necessarily a bad thing, but understand what is happening, that corporations that are trying to sell you things are trying to generate, they want your attention. How do they do that? They don't do it by saying, hey, everything's great. They do it by making you nervous, making you tense, manufacturing conflict where there isn't necessarily any conflict. And this is not a new reality, right? Newspaper people have been doing this for a long time. But understand that the conflict that we imagine and this idea that things are terrible and the world is coming apart, it's not backed up by the data. And it's, to a large degree, it is manufactured by people that are trying to get your attention.
So let me see if I get this right, Luke, because I want to bring us back to the second part of the question, which is, what can the church do? What can we as Christians do? What you're saying is, the goal of the internet, or the companies that we use on the internet, be that Google, Facebook, Candy Crush, whatever, is to keep our attention. And the way to keep our attention is, so that they can sell our data and all, the way to keep our attention is showing us bad news. So the algorithm, which is this computer program, that selects what we see.
And there are multiple
And there are multiple. So when we say the algorithm, each thing has an algorithm, and I'm trying to simplify, but
Yeah.
selects what we see, so that we see mostly bad news, so that we can stay because we need to be plugged in and all this kind of stuff. So that's how it tailors what we see. So what can the church do? I think that my conclusion to what can the church do is, if this is the case, I mean, I think that the church can offer some hope in digital spaces. The church can be a positive influence in digital spaces. We can, you can post something positive and something good and talk about God's goodness and all this kind of stuff. But the effectiveness of the church in the digital space is limited, especially if you're spreading the good news.
Mm.
Like it sounds like if you're competing with a system that is tailored to not really like good news,
Yeah.
spreading good news seems kind of limited. Like it's going to be limited effectiveness. You can do it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not going to be as effective as if we were spreading bad news.
Right. Yeah, so what I would say is don't participate in the negative things that you see online. Somebody jumps online and says, well, this group is ruining America or whatever, whatever those common things that we see online. Don't participate. Understand that there are a lot of people out there, some of them that are from foreign countries that are attacking America, trying to break our unity and things like that, but also just companies that are trying to grab your attention. They're feeding you, and there's documented evidence. Randy Deaton and I have talked about this. There's documented evidence of these farms where people are making up stories and putting them out online, and people are taking the bait. So understand, and this goes back to what we talked about last week, when Jesus sent the disciples out, he told them to be as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. That's still good advice. Be wise, be aware that people are baiting you online for your money, for your attention, and also to generate some conflict. There are people that want America to fall. Okay, well, let's generate some conflict in America. And so my first advice is don't take the bait. Okay? When you see somebody put some ridiculous statement online, just keep scrolling.
Yeah.
Or turn off your computer, go outside.
And that's I think, no, seriously, don't take the bait. I think that's the first. And I would say that a key prophetic voice of the church is to call people out of those spaces towards unmediated interactions. Because this is unmediated interaction. I'm looking at you as a person, into your eyes, and talking to you, and choosing the kind of information that goes in. There's no one other than Luke and myself choosing the conversation that goes with you. It's not a computer program, that's an unmediated interaction. I think that's a key prophetic role of the church, to say, hey, we're going to do things in the physical world. I'm not going to say the real world, because the internet is real, is there, but in the physical world, so that I can look you in the eye and talk to you and say to you what I will say to you by looking you when I look you in the eye. Because there's another question that we had was, how do we maintain community in a world where technology allows us to distance ourselves? I think one thing that we need to remember is, so we talked about a lot about what we see, right? The content we see and stuff. The algorithms try to dictate what you say to. Because when you are scrolling on Facebook and you see someone else's comment and stuff, in a way, social media doesn't want to show you that there's a human on the other side. They want to tell you that there is a user on the other side, a consumer. So it's a conversation between consumers and products and services. It's not between human beings. So if that's the kind of thing that Luke is saying, like someone said something abrasive, how would you have a conversation with a person in real life? And I think that's kind of like starts moving us towards some of the practical considerations that we wanted to talk about today. Is that I think one of the very practical things that we often talk about, and I think is good advice, I really think it's good advice, is use it less. Use digital stuff less. Now, not because I think it's necessarily bad, but because, as Luke said, the goal of all the big companies that you use it more. So resist it. Use it less. But what else can we do, Luke? What else can we do to live this digital life well as Christians, as people who walk in this way of Christ, and but also live in this world?
Be aware that these algorithms, these people that write these algorithms, are trying to entice you. Okay, when I look at farming videos, like I talked about last week, I'll look at a farming video. It'll show me a bunch of the algorithms. Say, oh, you like farming videos? Here's a bunch of farming videos, and then suddenly, here's a girl driving a tractor in a tank top. Be aware of what's happening there, okay? This algorithm has identified me as, a male, okay? Understand, don't be a sheep, okay? Say, I see what you're doing there, and intentionally avoid that, okay? And it's not just that, it's any number of things. When the algorithm will pretty quickly identify your political leanings, okay? Be aware of that. And when it shows you something that really gets you fired up, be smarter than that, okay? Be smarter than that. When we go back to attention and the church's response to this whole situation, I keep thinking of Mary Oliver's famous line. She said, this is the first, I'm going to paraphrase, this is the first, the wildest, and the wisest thing I know, that the soul exists and it's composed completely of attentiveness. And what are you giving your attention to? Be aware of that. What are you giving your attention to? Make sure that you're giving your attention to good things and that you're maintaining dominion over yourself and that part of the world that God is wanting you to maintain dominion over. Protect it. If your kids are online, which almost all kids are, you need to be aware of some of the bad things that are happening online. As a teacher, I can't tell you how many times I have students tell me, oh, I'm sorry I was online till 1 a.m. this morning. Okay, folks, don't give your kids access to the internet after they go to bed at night, or maintain dominion over these things and understand that there are bad things out there. People are trying to grab your kids' attention.
One thing that you said earlier in our conversations was, think about what you want when you go use the internet. Like, what do you want? Don't go and avoid just browsing. Avoid, I'm bored. Because that's the bait, right? I'm bored. I'm just gonna do something. What do you want? Do you want to see how Janie Doe that you went to high school with is doing? Okay, go see how Janie Doe is doing. But maybe keep scrolling from that. Or do you want to watch
or
a
if
farming?
Janie Doe has gotten involved in this radical group, just let it go.
Yeah.
Don't start arguing.
Or do you want to watch a farming video? Search for farming video, watch a farming video, and don't keep going on the algorithm, because I think that's one of the things that. The other thing that I think it's important, especially with social media, I would say use the internet to converse with people, not users. Users, you have that mediated interaction with, you're in the comment section, you're commenting about something, and usually that something is not the best thing. Sometimes it's their kids, their grandkids' pictures, or their latest trip. That's good. But if you want to have a conversation, call the person. Like, these days we have access to free video calling. Like, think about that. But most of you were my age or growing up, that was unfathomable. That was thing from Star Trek.
Long distance phone call was
Long distance phone call was
That was a big
expensive.
deal.
Like the idea of seeing someone, that was like sci-fi. Do it. Call your friends, see your friends, see how they are doing, and have a conversation. Like, especially if they are far away, have a conversation face to face with your phone. Use that to your advantage if you're gonna use it. That's a good way to use it. Don't take the bait. God has a different agenda for you. God created you to connect with people. God created you to be in this world. And by being, what we mean is to be present, to pay attention to where you are, not to all the places that you aren't, but are calling for your attention. One discipline that I have at my best, don't always get to do it, but one discipline that I have at my best is, I don't look at my phone within the first hour of being awake. Because my day, you know what? Every morning, my day should start with the little dog that sleeps on my bed and wants pets every morning. Like, is there a happier thing than that? Or your spouse that sleeps on your bed with you? Or your children that sleep on the room right by you? It doesn't matter what's happening in DC. My little dog wants cuddles every morning. My phone wants to tell me what's happening in DC and the Middle East and everything. But where I am when I first wake up in the morning is on that bed, in this place, and you are on your bed with your family, or maybe by yourself, but you woke up. You can breathe. And that's a blessing in and of itself. So don't take the bait. Don't take it first thing in the morning. Be present first thing in the morning to where you are. And resist those things that want to grab your attention.
And also, don't label it all as bad. There are good things. I get to check the weather often. Yesterday when the storms were coming through, I was online a lot looking at the storms. I get discounts from McDonald's and other places. There are a lot of really good things out there. So I think we make a mistake when we write it all out of our lives. But we have to be wise about the way we use this resource.
That's it for today. Next week, we're going to be talking about AI. A lot of you want to know about AI. If you have more questions, submit them online. Let us know. But that's the future, and in many ways, the present is AI. It's part of everyone's daily life, even if you don't know. That's part of your daily life. So we will be talking about that, and we'll be talking about some of the things that are coming in the future. So I'm excited for that, and I'm nervous for that too, but I will see you here next week.
Yeah. you.